But Brandon, let's move over to the hardwood before we finish the podcast making our picks with our final bowl game. Actually, this is the podcast. Last picks. Last picks we ever have to do for football season. I know you're happy.
Just this year.
Because this year. Obviously,
don't make it seem like we're never coming back.
But I know you'll be happy because I know how you've hated bowl season so far.
Well, you
just like all the pointless bowls.
They're just dumb. We all know it's just so that they can make money and stuff like that. I get it. I understand it. It's capitalism.
But what we're going to do is we're going to the hardwood. And here's what I want to do. This is, if you're on Blog Talk Radio, iTunes, Stitcher, TuneIn Radio, you're getting this on Tuesday. That's a hunky-dory. You're all happy. But if you're listening to this or you're watching this on YouTube, hello, guys, you're getting this on Thursday. Tomorrow, as this goes up on YouTube, we'll begin conference play, more importantly for the Big 12 Conference. And I'm looking at an article right here on ESPN that says College Basketball Hoops Power Rankings. It's time to notice the Big 12. And I look at the standings for the Big 12. The lowest team right now, as we record this on Monday, December 18th, because we're pre-recording this for the Christmas week. Texas is the lowest team at 8-3. The best team, TCU at 11-0. They have 3 teams with 1 losses. They have 5 teams with 2 losses. I want to ask you this, Brandon. Kind of a preemptive and preview for conference season coming up. Will the Big 12 be the best conference in college basketball this year? Will they be the best as in, and this is what I mean by this question, will they have the most tournament teams when we get to the tournament? That's what I mean. Be the best to where when we get to bracketology, it's like, man, this conference was so good, we got to go with about 6 of these teams.
Well, I know that it's, there's still plenty of time left. There's still plenty of games to be played in the meat and potatoes now coming.
Love potatoes.
Yes, you do. But I would say right now, you take a look. TCU ranked. Texas Tech ranked. West Virginia ranked. Oklahoma ranked. Baylor ranked. Kansas is ranked. I mean, it's incredible. All these teams that are ranked all in the Big 12. The Big 12 for me would certainly have to just completely implode. Multiple teams would have to implode and just stink the rest of the way out for them to not be the best conference out of the Power Fives in basketball this season. Especially at this point, they have been so good. They have been so good, so strong. Their worst team, 3 losses. That's impressive. That's really, really good.
And one of those 3 losses for Texas was to Duke. It was to Duke.
And they shouldn't have even lost.
Well, it was to Duke in overtime where Bamba, he was fouled out. And the only reason they lost is because they didn't have anyone that could guard Marvin Bagley.
Well, who really does?
Yeah.
But I think that so far this has been the strongest conference in the NCAA so far. It has been, I think, one of the most exciting conferences so far. They've got really good teams with really good players. And honestly, Ricky, this is one of the first times that I think we've, in a little while now, that we've taken a look at the Big 12 and we've talked about someone, it feels like, in a while, outside of just Kansas.
Yeah.
Even a couple of years ago, we talked about Oklahoma because they had Buddy Hield there, and they were a good team. They were a strong team.
Well, last year, if I'm not mistaken, this is their conference tournament. Didn't that come down to, what was it, TCU Oklahoma? Wasn't that the conference title game, if I'm not mistaken?
Ricky, I'll be honest with you, I can't remember.
Which was a great game to watch, but I remember TCU, even in the conference tournament, was making a run.
But this is, again, honestly, I just feel like from this conference, when you talk about it, and if you say to the average fan, have you heard of the Big 12? Oh, Kansas? Yeah, but I feel like that's what you get. And that's not necessarily a bad thing because Kansas has been, or I shouldn't say a bad thing, that's not necessarily an uncommon thing that you would hear because Kansas has been the team in there and has been one of the top teams, one of the top seeds many times in the tournament. Yeah, they've been the mainstream media. And when it comes down to everyone else, they're just kind of side dishes. But I think they're kind of trying to say, no, we're a full course meal here. So that's really, put it in food terms for you. But I think,
love when you do that, Brian. I love it.
It may have been the first time I've done it, but you do like it. But again, you have TCU competing. They haven't lost a game yet. Texas Tech 1 loss. West Virginia 1 loss. Oklahoma 8-1 with possibly one of the best players in the country on their team. They've just been incredible. Baylor with 2 losses. Kansas isn't even at the top of the pack right now. 9-2 in the middle to lower end right now, just based on where they're at standing wise. It is refreshing to see some of these other teams kind of pop out in front, at least to start things off. Once you get into conference play, that's when you start playing against each other and seeing who's the best out of those conference teams. And it's a lot of fun, but so far we are really looking at a strong Big 12 conference in college basketball.
Well, and the thing, and I know it's early, but I mean, I'm looking right now, Joe Lunardi, his last Bracketology bracket was updated on December 14th. And what he has right now is him personally, he has 11 ACC teams in the tournament. The next 2, 7 SEC teams and 7 Big 12 teams. Now, the thing that you got to look at is when, let's see, the first 4 out, no Big 10, Big 12 teams there. So, yeah, actually, the next 8, he doesn't have any other Big 12 teams in. But like when I look at Friday and Saturday coming up, because this is coming out on Thursday, the matchups that we're already going to see to start off on Friday, we're going to get right now, as we're recording this early, a 2-loss Baylor team at the moment against a 1-loss Texas Tech team. Both of those are ranked. That'll be in Lubbock, Texas. In Austin, we're going to get Kansas, Texas. That's going to be a good matchup. And even West Virginia, Oklahoma State, Kansas State, Ohio State. But the big one to me, the Saturday matchup, we're going to get Oklahoma. The first game that Trae Young and Oklahoma get to play is, here you go. Right now, undefeated TCU. Here you go. Have fun.
That's pretty
impressive.
impressive.
Have fun on the road in Fort Worth, Texas. So it's not going to be a home game for the Sooners. It's going to be a road game. And let's be completely honest. This TCU team should be undefeated when they go into there, because the only other game that they are going to play before that is, to me, an easy game against William and Mary. They should demolish William and Mary at home and be 12-0 ready for the Sooners on Saturday.
Well, it's really fun, and this is where it gets to be really fun to watch and see some of these really good players on display, like your Trae Youngs, and you get to see which one's the better team. You know, you've played your out of conference schedules, and a lot of these teams have played some really good ones. I mean, I'm looking at Oklahoma right now. They played USC. They nail biter there, 85-83. They beat
Arkansas.
them. USC 25 at the time. Wichita State 91-83. Wichita State 3 at the time on the road at Wichita State. Arkansas
that was
one.
Loss.
They lost that one. They lost 92-83 there, but. You're looking at some really good games, and I really want to look at that Wichita State game because they won that one 91-83. I think Wichita State is a very good team, very strong team. They're now down to 11 in the rankings that just came out today. But that's a good team. You hung on. You beat a good team like that. You're pretty good. You're pretty good. And Oklahoma, I think, is going to be one of those teams this year that's back among the top of the pack in the Big 12 as being really good. So when they play TCU, who, like you said, undefeated right now and certainly could be undefeated when it gets to that game on December 30th, on the road at TCU, you're in for a good one.
Well, and I'm going to screw up this. I screw up this team every year, but like I even look at Texas. They have 3 losses, right? You look at their losses already in the year. 2 of them were I want to say it was the PX80, I believe, was the tournament that they played, Duke, and then the Zags, Gonzaga. And both of those games between Duke and Gonzaga, overtime games. They lost to Duke 85-74. Like I said, that was because Bamba was fouled out. They couldn't have anyone guard Bagley. But then the Zags, they only lost 76-71. Quality losses aren't good, but quality losses. Their only bad loss to me, Michigan. That's it. And it was a 59-52 loss at home to Michigan. I mean, the thing is, these teams The one that kind of sparks me as kind of a little weird is their last game. They only won 47-46 against Tennessee State. That one kind of, I saw it and I kind of went, what? Only 47 points? That sounds like a first half, not an entire game when it comes to Texas, but that's your worst team, and that's the opponents that you've lost to. This conference, to me, like, what I feel like with the Big 12 is I feel like the ACC is going to be the more favored conference when it comes to teams getting in the tournament. That's why you see Lenardi give them 11 teams. The Conference of Champions, the ACC, you have Duke, North Carolina, all these teams. They're kind of like the hoity-toity conference without being, I'm not saying all the teams are hoity-toity, but they're like the Conference of Champions. We're the best conference. Whereas the Big 12, I feel like a little bit more gritty. The Big 12 right now is going to be what we used to think the Big 10 was, or used to say the Big 10 was. Because remember, 2, 3, 4 years ago, we were saying, hey, is the Big 10 the best conference in college basketball? Now we're going to be saying that about the Big 12. Yeah.
Well, it was.
It was.
I mean, you take a look at it. You look at those Big 10 teams at the time, and they were strong. I mean, they were some really very good, strong teams. I mean, I still remember Ohio State for the longest time was real good. I mean, they were
State,
cranking
Michigan,
out teams.
Michigan State, Indiana. Like, you had the teams there. Purdue usually was at the bottom of the upper echelon, but they started to go up. Ohio State fell a little bit. I think this is going to be more of that, where it's like from top to bottom, anybody in this conference can beat anybody on any given night. And I think every single not every single, but most of the Big 12 matchups in the conference are going to be great to watch, and we're probably going to be seeing a ton of like, holy crap, I didn't expect that team to beat that team. But like I said, with this conference, I feel like any given team can beat anyone on any given night.
And to talk about a team that has been the staple for this conference for many years, the Kansas Jayhawks.
Rock Chalk Jayhawk.
Is that they beat Kentucky, their second game of the season. We saw that game
live
at the United Center.
It's a great game.
It was a great game. And what do we remember from that game, Ricky? Let's go, Cats!
Yeah.
All right, so Kentucky.
For those who weren't there with us, we were the section that we bought tickets for, because literally they split the United Center into 4. Our seats were in the Kentucky, like the section that they gave to Kentucky fans. So we were surrounded by Wildcat, Blue Cat, or Blue
with a couple of
Big Blue Nation,
with a couple of Kansas Jayhawk fans to our left.
Well, it was a Kansas fan and a Michigan State fan.
Yes,
I remember that. But we were surrounded mostly by Big Blue Nation surrounded us.
Yes, we were.
BBN was surrounded us. Big Blue Nation.
But what I wanted to say about Kansas is that they played that game against Kentucky, tough game. They won it 65-61. But since then, the only other team that they've played that's competitive was Arizona State. They lost 95-85. Kansas has had one of the easiest schedules so far in terms of ranked teams. They have had one of the easiest schedules, and yet they're 9-2.
Here's the only thing I'm going to mention is, first off, what I find funny is I just pulled up the rankings. Michigan State, who lost that same day we went to the United Center, they're back up to the number 2 team in the nation. But the thing is, the Arizona State loss, I think, although Arizona State was 16 at the time, I think that is a quality loss for Kansas. Because right now, Arizona State's the number 3 team in the country. So, I mean, it's kind of like we look at it all the time.
I'm not saying that's not that it's not a loss that you can.
You should have beat Washington.
Well, exactly. I'm not saying that you can't look at Arizona State and say, hey, you know what? That was a competitive game. Yeah. We lost that one. You know, we straight up just lost that one. They were a good team. But I'm saying outside of that, there's nobody else that you can look at and go. And Kentucky, you know, Kentucky obviously being a good. You can't look and go, yeah, man, that San Diego State game that was tough. Texas Southern. Now that was a tough. Oakland, Tully, none of those are going. You know what I'm saying?
I get it.
Not that every game has to be back and forth and back and forth. Ranked teams, but you
got to have some of those games.
You have to. But Washington, like you said, that's a loss that you look at and you go, probably shouldn't have lost that game. And then coming up, you've got Stanford on the road, Texas on the road, Texas Tech at home, on the road at TCU. That takes us to January 6th. That game on the road at TCU, I think, again, will be an interesting one just because right now, TCU being the number one team in that conference in the Big 12 at 11-0.
Well, here's what I'll ask you before we end this up and we go over to our picks for the rest of the bowl games. Any final thoughts on this kind of bracketology segment with Big 12 being could they be the best conference in college basketball?
Well, I just want to say I'm really excited that we're looking at the Big 12 right now because a lot of times, college basketball time, it's looking at the ACC. That's what it's usually looking at, but I'm excited that
the Conference of Champions, Brandon. You didn't say it right. The Conference of Champions. I don't know why I'm putting like a British accent on it.
But
I put weird accent on things that shouldn't have accents. That's what I do.
I really do like seeing this conference in the Big 12 really seem to take a leap this year so far. Again, with their worst team, quote unquote, being Texas at 8-3. It's refreshing.
One thing I will say, and I was thinking about this watching the Oklahoma-Wichita State game this past weekend, although part of me felt like, oh, God, Oklahoma's going to let them get back in there, but poor shooting kept the Shockers out of it. Watching that game, I'm just going, for sure this Oklahoma team's going to be a second weekend team, and I'm leaning towards they could be a Final Four team. That's what I'm looking at. I mean, they've got the star power, they've got the team, they've got the coach. At this moment, if you said, Ricky, how far are they going to go? Sweet 16 at the least. And that's one thing watching that. I can't wait to, now we're going to get into conference schedule and we're going to get into teams that know each other. And it's basically, like I said for this one, anyone can beat anybody on any given night. But this is where you guys come in. Let us know what you guys think down below in the comment section. Will the Big 12 be the best conference in college basketball this season? Let us know what you guys think down below.